Phew! Dynamix!
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Classic Gaming Brothers. I'm Zach.
And I'm Seth.
We are the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right. We are the Classic Gaming Brothers.
We are the Classic Gaming Brothers. That's
right.
right. Let's thank Barry again for coming on to the Premium Edition Lounge, as we call it.
Yes. Thanks for keeping our lights on.
Our exclusive series that just features Barry and nothing else.
Do you know what I like about Barry? He helps us keep our lights on, but it's only the neon sign that says Premium Edition Lounge. It's the only light we have
sign,
on.
Though. It's a nice sign.
It is. It's very bright, but it's the only thing that gives us the light in the studios.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but eating my sad can of cold soup by the light of Premium Edition Lounge is a nice reminder of where we started.
You have the soups. I just have beans.
Oh, mine might be beans, but it might be very old beans that are now soup.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair. I remember when producer Doug is the one that buys our groceries, and he said, you only get beans until you make something good.
That was many years ago, which might explain all the farts I've had to cut out of this podcast.
Nothing like a good old fart joke to get us going. Anyway, Zach, what have you recently been playing?
Because we talked about Battletoads, I got into a Battletoads mood, so I played Battletoads Double Dragon, the Battletoads Double Dragon crossover that we talked about in the episode that we did on Battletoads. This game was developed by Rare in 1993 and released for the Sega Genesis, NES, Super Nintendo, and Game Boy. I played the Sega Genesis version because that's the version that Seth and I owned, and yeah, it's a great game. It's a weird game because Battletoads and Double Dragon are two franchises that don't really seem like they'd mesh together, besides the fact that they were both created by Rare, in the sense that Battletoads is about anthropomorphic toads who are in space trying to stop an evil queen, and Double Dragon is about gang wars.
But do you know what would help with your gang wars? Anthropomorphic toads.
Yeah, having like 8-foot tall toads would definitely help stop gang wars.
Or at least help you win gang wars.
Also help you win gang wars.
I don't know if it'll help you stop them.
Yeah, there'll still be more, but you'll have toads on your side.
I feel like that's the premise of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, especially the live action one.
The movie's pretty much just about gangs and turtles.
I know. It's been a long time since I've seen that.
Anyway, Battletoads Double Dragon, great game. You can listen to all about us talk about it in the last episode, and we go into more detail on it than that. Anyway, Seth, what have you been playing?
So recently I've been playing Myst.
Ooh.
Developed by Scion Worlds, and this Myst was released in 2021, which was different than the other Mysts that were released, because Myst has been released a lot. This one is a remaster. It's another remastered of Myst, and since I own all of the Mysts, I had to get it. In fact, I thought I got it when I went to PAX with Zach, and I bought Myst for the Switch, but it wasn't Myst, it was Real Myst. Don't get that game.
That game's disappointing.
Do you know how disappointing that game is? When you open a door, it uses the AOL Instant Messenger door
It does,
sound.
yeah.
Any game that you could describe as uses AOL Instant Message sounds and it's not Emily is Away, it's probably not a great game. Anyway, the one that was released in 2021 is glorious. It is a very remastered, beautiful, and I would say definitely the definitive edition of the game right now. I've been playing through it. I did all of Stone Ship, which is the world that is in the boat that is sunk, and you have to raise the boat and then go through it. And I also did the mechanical world, which is the gears. You have to go to the clock tower and you have to put in the right time, and then the gear opens. So now I'm on the Selenic world, which is the one through the spaceship. And after I do the Selenic world, I'm going to be going to the tree world, and then I will be done with Myst. And to be super excited, I've been going through the game without too much help. I did need it a little bit with the spaceship puzzle because that puzzle is dumb. I also put in the right combination. Well, I didn't put in the right combination, but I used the right logic to get to the combination. I was really happy about that. So, fun story. I played Myst with Classic Dad, and we got to the sound puzzle, and he had to help me because you have to use, there's a couple ways you can solve this, but you have to move these essentially sliders, and each level of the slider has a different note, and you have to play the song from a random book in the library that has the correct sequence on the organ to get the right tone to match it to the right slider to the right tone. And that's how we did it when I was a kid. Dad was really good with knowing what tones things were, and he matched it. However, going back now, I realized it's in a scale, and it starts at the low end on the bottom of the slider, and it goes to the high end, and you could just count the keys. And then you just move it up by the right number of keys, and you could solve it. And I was going to tell Dad about that, but instead I'll just tell him in the episode, like I just did. Anyway, after I beat Myst, maybe I'll go and play Riven, but I don't think Riven has been remastered yet, and that makes me sad.
I don't even think there was like a real Riven, like the real Myst.
There was a real Riven. Oh, like a bad version of Riven.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Riven has only been released once, and that is as Riven, the sequel to Myst.
I really think that they should remaster Riven. I know that they're currently working on Firmament, and I think they're working on something else, so they're probably too busy to work on remastering Riven. But anyway, Riven is a phenomenal game. Anyway, so is Myst, the one released in 2021, and the one that was released back in the 90s. Great game, and it runs pretty good on the deck.
Apparently Myst 2021 is available in VR.
It is also available in VR. You only have to buy it once, and you can select whether or not you start it in VR. I packed my VR stuff away, and I have never reset it back up. So maybe one day I'll play it in VR, and it'll be super exciting. I played Abduction in VR, and that was a lot of fun. Anyway, let's get into the actual episode.
Yeah, let's talk about today's topic. So today we are going to be talking about a company that kind of had their hands in everything. So to provide context for why we're talking about today's company, Seth and I were talking about what to talk about today. And Seth said he wanted to talk about the game Tribes, which is a great game. And we were talking about Tribes a bit.
I would say that Tribes is a better box than a game.
It is a very good box. But Seth said, do you know who made Tribes? And I said, who? And he said, the same people who made Sid and Nal's Incredible Toon Machine. And I said, we should do an episode on the Incredible Toon Machine. And then Seth said, let's just do an episode on Dynamix because they're the company that made them.
They also did Red Baron.
Which is also a good game.
And also just an entirely different game than both Incredible Toon Machine and Tribes.
Yeah, for sure. So we're going to talk about Dynamix. And yeah, I mean, Seth and I have memories of playing Dynamix games. Interestingly enough, Seth and I got into a very heated argument just a moment ago because I remember playing the Incredible Toon Machine, which was the sequel to Sid and Nal's Incredible Toons. But Seth insists that we played Sid and Nal's Incredible Toons. Then we found out through logical deduction that Seth likely played Sid and Nal's Incredible Toons, and I likely played a pirated copy of Incredible Toon Machine.
The reason for that, when Sid and Nal's Incredible Toon came out, the intro to the game was Dynamix, a Sierra company. But by the time that the reissue or the changeover, it had that the owner was Sierra Online.
Yeah.
It was not Dynamix. But it was the same. Jeff Tunnell is it's Jeff's creature because it comes up with like a Jeff Tunnell Productions.
Yeah, they're almost identical games. Just one has CD quality, like music and stuff.
And an intro, which is ridiculous.
Well, anyway, to get into Dynamix, we'll talk about their history. Dynamix started back in 1983 and was founded by Jeff Tunnell and Damon Sly, who at the time were two graduates from the University of Oregon. Originally, it was named Software Entertainment Company, which is a very generic name for a company. And they published one game, Stellar 7, and made about $4,000 off of it. And then they decided they needed to change things up. For one thing, they should probably change the name of their company because Software Entertainment Company, that would confuse me if I was in a store and someone was like, hey, you want to play a game made by Software Entertainment Company? And I'd be like, yeah, sure. Can I pay you with dollar bills from my pocket?
And we'll talk a little bit about this, but originally the Software Entertainment Company was really Jeff's desire to be a publisher.
Right.
So you would just see games that were published by Software Entertainment Company, except you didn't see games, you saw a game. We say that they made $4,000 off of it, and really we're like, I think it's time to change things up. It's not that Stellar 7 was a bad game. In fact, Stellar 7 was actually a really good game. The issue was, it costs a lot of money to be a publisher, and they were not netting the type of money that they wanted. It was really that they really only made like $4,000 after cost of being a publisher, which if you didn't have all those costs of being a publisher, maybe they would have had more money.
Yeah. Now, Stellar 7 was released in 1983 for the Apple II by Software Entertainment Group, and then re-released the following year, again for the Apple II, and also for the Commodore 64, and that re-release was handled by Penguin Software. Stellar 7 is a first-person arcade tank simulation, which has wireframe graphics. You are the pilot of the Raven and must go through 7 levels, defeating enemies to get to the next star system. This all might sound familiar to fans of Battlezone, because the game started out when Damon Sly was playing Battlezone, and a neighbor friend asked him if he could make a game similar to it. So he did. Damon got on his Apple II, which had a 1 megahertz CPU and 48K of RAM, and he would go on to figure out how to create wireframe 3D graphics and do the math required on a 6502 so that it would play fast enough, which is impressive on an Apple II, which can barely handle text. He would go on to code up the 3-space engine, which he would continue to use, maintain, and upgrade to build Stellar 7, and wrote the entire game in algorithm form into actual notebook paper. Then he would go on to translate the notebooks into 6502 assembly and would type the entire code to get the game to actually work. All while Damon was living at home with his parents and didn't have any external pressures to create the project. However, did need income, so he got a job.
Where did he have that job? Why? Other graduate of University of Oregon, Jeff Tunnell, hired Damon to come work at his software store, Computer Tutor, which is a great name for a store.
Yeah, that's the best name for a store.
I can imagine, like, during this time, this is like the late 80s, how many stores called Computer Tutor were out there in the wild, all owned independently. Jeff and Damon ended up becoming fast friends because both of them didn't want to work at Jeff's computer store, including Jeff, and they wanted to go work in the gaming industry. Damon knew he had a pretty good game on his hands with Stellar 7 and thought about going to the various publishing companies such as Electronic Arts, Sierra, or Broderbund, but Jeff said no. Jeff was like, how about I publish your game and we'll do it together. So Jeff would end up selling his software shop, and together they formed up this company, Software Entertainment Company, or SEC, to publish the game. Now, there's this fun side tangent that we have to go into about Stellar 7. And this fun fact about Stellar 7 is that well-known author Tom Clancy in 1988 named Stellar 7 as one of his top 2 favorite video games. He stated that he thought it was out of print at the time of the interview, but that it was a simple space arcade shoot-'em-up, and that it was so unforgiving it was just like life, which he thought was a perfect video game for him to play while he was on his exercise bicycle. He said he would just boot up the game, get on the bicycle, and grab the controller and just have a blast. His favorite game, however, was not Stellar 7, which was his number 2. Tom Clancy's favorite game in 1988, since time has changed, I don't know what his current favorite game is, but his favorite game in 1988 was Leather Goddess of Phobos, which was a game that is an interactive fiction game which was developed and published by Infocom and was Infocom's first sex farce. And in this game, you had selectable gender and a selectable naughtiness level.
Ooh.
So the game would become more lewd. This game was an interesting game in its own right, since it also included, beyond having a 3D manual and 3D glasses for the manual, it included a scratch and sniff card that you would scratch and sniff at certain points in the game. But don't worry, it smelt like either pizza or chocolate. For a game that was lewd, people were worried, but there was nothing to be worried about since all the scratch and sniff smells were mostly innocuous. As a side note, Leather Goddesses of Phobos would go on to be Infocom's 5th top-selling game of all time. So there was a market for a sex farce game, and Tom Clancy was a fan. But we're going to go back to the Damon and Jeff saga now. And maybe one day we'll do, for episode 269, we can talk about Leather Goddesses of Phobos. Maybe we could get Tom Clancy's still. Is he dead?
He died 10 years ago.
Well, maybe he's playing Leather Goddesses of Phobos in heaven. Anyway, back to the Damon and Jeff saga. They realized that they really didn't have the money or connections or the infrastructure to be a publisher. So they would make the decision to close Software Entertainment Company. Then Damon convinced Jeff maybe we should just be game developers and pitch ideas to publishers. And Jeff was in. Thus, they formed Dynamix Software Development in March of 1984. Now, the first publisher that they would go to work with is Penguin Software, who would, with their help, re-release Stellar 7, except as an actual publisher. And they would continue to work with Penguin Software and would start working with Electronic Arts. They would go on to create sequels to Stellar 7, including one of the first games for the Commodore Amiga, Arctic Fox, which would go on to become quite successful. They would end up working with Kevin Ryan and Richard Hicks on the development of Arctic Fox, and after the success of it, they, being Kevin Ryan and Richard Hicks, would come on to Dynamix as owners and partners of the Dynamix Software Development. And by September of 1986, the company would go on to drop the software development part of their name and just shortened it to Dynamix.
Now, they would go on to release a number of games for the Commodore 64, including Project Firestart, which would go on to be an extremely successful game for the C64. In fact, Project Firestart was one of the first survival horror games that would go on to help define the genre as a whole. Limited ammunition, avoiding enemies, solving puzzles versus combat. These were all present in Project Firestart. The game is pseudo 3D, and it's a side-scrolling action-adventure game where you can move left or right across terrain, all the while blast enemies with a laser rifle and going through doorways, which is very traditional of survivor horror games.
And this was one of their first games where it was more interactive fiction than it was simulation. So Arctic Fox and Stellar 7 are simulation games. You're playing in a tank and shooting things. Maybe it'll be a flight simulator. Maybe it'll be a robot simulator. Regardless, they're simulation games, which was really like where Dynamix was drawing their strength from. So then they started doing Project Firestart, which was an interactive fiction, I think is what they're calling it. The difference between like a simulation game like Arctic Fox and an interactive fiction game like Project Firestart is that Project Firestart might need to have a story and cutscenes. And cutscenes and stories mean actors and writers, which frankly you don't need for a simulation game, which drives up costs.
Now, with all of their success, even if it was difficult for them to bring the products to market, they decided to expand the company. They built out an image production studio that included photography and lighting facilities and brought on color scanning and image processing, as well as a photo development lab. This was to help with getting back into self-publishing, as they needed these facilities to be able to create the packaging and manuals for the games. They would also go on to hire Cher Altucker to be in charge of makeup, costume design, and casting actors. Now, Dynamic's most successful games were simulators. Tank, Flight, etc. They desperately, though, wanted to get into interactive entertainment, hence why they invested a lot of money into a studio for interactive entertainment. And this really led them to the release of Project Firestart, which was good, but also extremely difficult for them to get off the ground. Jeff was confident in Dynamix's financial future, but also moving back into publishing really cost the company a lot of money and would stress their resources. They would go on to self-publish A-10 Tank Killer and David Wolf Secret Agent. One of these games would be a success, and maybe if the other one was too, what would happen in the future wouldn't happen. A-10 Tank Killer, a combat flight simulator, which was the bread and butter of Dynamic's strengths, would go on to be that very successful game, and was one of the first games to fully support VGA graphics, which allowed for 256 colors.
Wow. I like that they evolved their simulators where it's like first it's a tank, then it's a plane.
Yeah.
And then there's something else that they do as well. They also do mechs. So they do mechs, planes, and tanks. David Wolf's Secret Agent was more costly as it featured digitized cutscenes with bit mapping and 3D animations and actors. However, it had critical reception. Computer Gaming World would go on to state the game had too few action sequences, and though digitized footage was cutting edge for the time, they would go on to conclude that the game would not be worth playing more than once. In fact, 7 years after the release of David Wolf's Secret Agent, Computer Gaming World would go on to list David Wolf's Secret Agent in its 1996 list of worst games of all time and worst backstory of all time. So be that as it may, David Wolf's Secret Agent did not sell as well as A-10 Tank Killer and did not sell as well as it should have. Oh, well, I guess should have is as much as they wanted it to have. Now, in order to continue on as a developer and a publisher, they had to get $1.5 million to operate, which A10 Tank Killer and David Wolf's Secret Agent did not sell nearly well enough to close that gap. In fact, they would hire Tony Renecki to help with the business side of the house and would go on to license out the 3-space engine that they've used for all of their simulation games that was handcrafted from the beginning by Damon. They would license that out to Sierra Online in August of 1989 to help obtain funding and keep the lights on. They would also go get Mediagenic, which was formerly Activision, to publish their games Death Track, a sci-fi racing game, Mechwarrior, another combat simulator in mechs this time, and Die Hard, specifically the DOS version of the movie tie-in game. They would release all 3 of these games in December of 1989. And even though they were successful, especially Mechwarrior, they were still in a financial hole and they could not get out. March 27th, 1990, Sierra Online would come in and buy Dynamix for $1.5 million due to their impressive catalog of simulation games. Now, during the acquisition, Dynamix was working on a new game because they always were just kind of working on new games. And they were working on Red Baron. And December 19th, 1990, the end of the year that they were bought, they would go on to release Red Baron, and it would be one of the first games of many that they would release that was published by Sierra Online, where Dynamix in the intro would also get a tag that would say part of the Sierra family under their logo. Now, following the release of Red Baron, Dynamix would go on to release Rise of the Dragon in 1990, and then The Adventures of Willie Beamish in 1991. Both games released on DOS, Amiga, Mac OS, and the Sega CD. The Adventures of Willie Beamish was also the last game that Jeff Tunnell would be around for. He would leave Dynamix and would go start Jeff Tunnell Productions. And while technically its own company, his future games would go on to continue to be released by Sierra Online under their Dynamix brand.
Yes, which does cause for some confusion when trying to look up how many games were created by Dynamix, because they will also be listed the published games that were created by Jeff Tunnell Productions.
I mean, but were they really? They were created by Dynamix.
Which concludes his first game, which was a Jeff Tunnell's production game, but published under Dynamix. The Incredible Machine.
Why it has the little creature.
Which spawned its own series. So The Incredible Machine was just the first game in a very big series that has numerous spin-offs and sequels. The Incredible Machine, for those who have never played it, is a Rube Goldberg-inspired puzzle game. For those who don't know Rube Goldberg, this is a kind of a popular style of art where, like, for example, a ball goes down a ramp and hits a domino, and the domino hits a line of dominoes, and that falls onto a tea kettle, which ignites, and the air blows a balloon, and the balloon, you know what they are. They're those elaborate set pieces that are like the one that's shown at the beginning of Back to the Future, and all it does is make toast. This was a game, The Incredible Machine, where you pretty much just designed Rube Goldberg machines. In the game, you're required to complete an objective by finishing a puzzle with missing components. You are given a limited amount of components. All of the components need to be used for the puzzle, and your job is to figure out where these puzzle pieces go and to make sure the machine works. This could be, for example, getting a bowling ball to land in a specific area. To do this, you might need to make sure that certain ramps are at the correct angle, or that the bowling ball gets stopped in the right place so that it falls into the right part of the machine so that it would eventually get to its goal. The Incredible Machine saw a numerous amount of sequels, including a numbered sequel just called The Incredible Machine 2, but also spin-offs and re-releases, and its own spin-off series called Sid and Al's Incredible Tunes. This spin-off series was overseen by Dynamix. Sid and Al's Incredible Tunes and The Incredible 2 Machine are two very similar games that are also very similar to The Incredible Machine. Pretty much picture The Incredible Machine with a coat of paint. Let me take you back to Little Zach's era. When Little Zach was discovering the origins of the internet and games that were available to be downloaded, he discovered The Incredible Machine. He thought, wow, I love The Incredible Tune Machine. I'm sure I'll love The Incredible Machine. And when launching The Incredible Machine, Little Zach realized, well, this game does not look as fun, because instead of having a colorful cartoon cat, you have a very photorealistic cat. Pretty much all the devices in the Incredible Tune Machine and Sid and Al's Incredible Tunes have been redesigned to have an almost Looney Tunes or Tom and Jerry aesthetic to them. The game's primary characters are Sid E. Mouse and Al E. Cat. Sid E. Mouse being a yellow mouse and Al E. Cat being a blue cat. They kind of fit in the trope of cat versus mouse and are often central to the puzzles. As a general mechanic, Sid will always run away from Al, and Al will always chase Sid. However, certain objects can be put in their way. So like if a mask is put in front of Sid, then he might use that to scare Al so that Al runs away from Sid. Or a gun could be put in front of one of them and they might shoot the other person. So there's like ways you can kind of counteract their back and forth. And sometimes this is required to complete the puzzle. And sometimes your puzzle might require you to keep Sid away from Al in order to get maybe cheese, or to make sure that Al captures Sid. Now, there is actually a third game in the Incredible Toons series, but it's a Japanese exclusive that was only released on the PS1. This is Arthur to Astaroth no Nazo Makamuri Incredible Toons, and is a PS1 version of the game set in the Ghost and Goblins world.
What?
Yep.
That's wild.
It is.
Wait, so it's an Incredible Machine, Incredible Toons, set in the Ghost and Goblins world, released in Japan for the PlayStation 1.
Yes.
That's weird.
It is very weird. And the game was developed by Magical Formation using a licensed engine from Dynamix. So technically it's a Dynamix game that has a recoded paint. Like if you look at the gameplay for Arthur to Astaroth, it looks like Incredible Toon Machine, just everything is Ghosts and Goblins themed. The Incredible Machine series was actually released under a line of other games called Sierra Discovery series, which also included other Jeff Tunnel productions, such as Quirky and Queso's Turbo Science and Turbo Learning Mega Math. These sound boring, and if I had played Mega Math instead of Incredible Toon Machine, I probably wouldn't have strong memories from Dynamix. Dynamix would go on to expand in 1993. They went from a studio of about 30 people to a studio of over 100 people, and because of this, they had to relocate to downtown Eugene, Oregon. After the move, Dynamix began working on their next game, Space Quest V, The Next Mutation, and that was released in February of 1993. In 1994, after completing Aces Over Europe, Damon Sly would officially leave Dynamix. From here, he would actually take a hiatus on game development, and he wouldn't get back into game design until 2007, when he began work on Aces of Aces, which released in 2008.
Now, after David left, Dynamix would go on to create the first game in the MetalTech series, MetalTech Battle Drone. Battle Drone was a robot combat game, not too different from the BattleTech games, Mechwarrior, etc. Later games in the MetalTech series consisted of Earth Siege, Cyberstorm, and Tribes. In 1995, Jeff Tunnel returned to Dynamix, and then Sierra Online was sold to CUC International in 1996. CUC merged with HFS Incorporated in 1997 and became Sendint Corporation, and then in 1998, it was revealed that CUC was involved in an accounting fraud scheme. A French company, Havas, acquired Sendint Software for $800 million in cash, and then Havas was acquired by fellow French company Vivendi SE, and in May of 2001, Havas Interactive was renamed Vivendi Universal Interactive Publishing, and then to Vivendi Universal Games.
Man, what a sequence of events.
Vivendi would go on to work on Evil Genius,
which is a great game.
Following Jeff's return to Dynamix, the company would put out more games in the Red Baron series, the Incredible Machine series, the Tribes series, and in a line of sports title called Front Page Sports. If it was one thing that Dynamix was good at, it was churning out stuff.
Yeah, they released so many games.
They released a lot of games and sequels to games, and they were usually pretty good games. In 1999, Sierra Online officially underwent a restructuring, and in 2001, Dynamix was shut down. A very sad day. Following Dynamix's closure, several members of the team would start Garage Games, which would stay local in Eugene, Oregon. Jeff Tunnel and fellow ex-Dynamix and colleague Rick Overman would leave Garage Games and go found the company Push Button Labs. In total, from 1984 to 2001, Dynamix would develop over 92 games, which if you think about that, 84 to 90 is 6 years, and then from 90 to 2000 is 10 years, 17 years, 92 games.
Average is about 5 games a year.
5 games a year these guys were putting out. When Rockstar, what have they done in the last 5 years?
Release Grand Theft Auto 5 every year for 5 years.
It's just it was a whole different world back then.
But you can also tell that Dynamix kind of stretched themselves. Like, they weren't just developing one type game. I mean, they got known for their simulation games. I think there was actually an interview with Damon Sly where he said that pretty much when you say Dynamix, gamers think of flight sims. And for good reason. The simulation games that Dynamix put out were great. But Dynamix was also releasing things like the Tribes games, or Incredible Machine, or the original Battle Drome game, or Mechwarrior, or the like random educational games like Mega Math. They were doing everything. So I'm kind of curious what their internal structure looked like, especially when they had over 100 developers, because I wouldn't be surprised if your development teams would be split amongst genres.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, you would have the people that whole job was just develop Incredible Machine games, people whose whole job was just develop simulation games, and then like the education department. It's just a very interesting, I think, company, and tons of games. They're all pretty good. I can't really, like, when I was looking through the list of games, I was like, yeah, a lot of these are familiar, and a lot of these were pretty decent games.
Yeah, the Secret Agent game was probably bad, but
yeah, and I think a couple of their tie-in games weren't amazing. Like, they did Ghostbusters 2 for DOS, and
was Die Hard for DOS pretty good? There was a lot of Die Hard games.
We literally had an episode where we talked about Die Hard games.
Oh, we did? For Christmas?
Oh, God. The Die Hard for DOS looks very impressive, but this game is not very good looking. I need you to see this game. Wait, I'm gonna just post this here. Hold on.
Why does he walk like that?
I don't know.
What is going on? Why is he wearing that? So in the footage of Die Hard for the DOS game, you play as Bruce Willis's character, John McClane, but he is wearing a hot pink tank top and cyan color pants, like hot pants. And he either dances with people and then when he walks like he is a confident male stripper.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure the reason his shirt is like hot pink is because in the movie he wears a white shirt that gets coated in blood and dirt, but it looks hot pink. So his pants are just teal. So I like the inventory of John McClane in this game, which consists of a gun, like an extension cable, a lighter, pack of cigarettes, an open can of beans, and what I assume is a radio, which is probably the detonator from Die Hard.
Looks like all the stuff that we have in our studio.
I like the open can of beans with a fork in it.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we have right on our desk right now.
He doesn't even eat beans in the movie. He eats a Twinkie. Anyway, Dynamix is a fascinating company with a fascinating line of games.
Some of them are good.
Some of them are good. Some of them are Die Hard. Anyway, with that, we're going to get into our retro rewind. Seth gave me Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends for the Sega Genesis. This game was developed by Malibu Interactive and published by THQ in 1993.
So they were publishing like Super Star Wars at the same time.
They sure were. Now, in the last episode, Seth said, I think this is a Mega Drive game. I know for a fact this game was released as both a Sega Genesis and a Mega Drive game, because the version I played referred to Sir Topham Hatt as Sir Topham Hatt, when his name in England is the Fat Controller.
If you play the Mega Drive game, does it refer to him as the Fat Controller?
Don't know, I didn't play the Mega Drive game.
I told you to play the Mega Drive version.
In the game, you can play as either Thomas, who's a blue train, James, who is a red train, Percy, who's a green train, Toby, who is a trolley, and Duck, who is also a green train, but square.
I wish you could play as, what's his name? Harold, the helicopter?
The Harold, the helicopter. I wish you could play as Gordon, because he's a giant train.
He's the blue one,
He's blue, but he's big.
I've ridden on a Thomas.
Nice.
Did I tell you that?
I think I have too, because there used to be the one in Connecticut that used to...
There are two, in fact, that are in existence. There is one in Essex, Connecticut, and the other is in some weird small town that I went to in England. And they are both birthed from the same line, and they're the only two left from that line.
Nice. Fun fact about the Essex, Connecticut Thomas. I was there once with Dad and a friend of his and that friend's daughter. So we saw Thomas and we had some photos with Thomas, and we saw Jerry Seinfeld.
Oh, that's fun.
He was on the train. He was on Thomas.
Did you get pictures of Jerry Seinfeld on Thomas?
No, that would be great.
That was like when Jerry Seinfeld was actually really popular.
yeah. It's like that was back when Jerry Seinfeld was relevant.
Yeah. We when we were on the train, this is not as a fun story as seeing Jerry Seinfeld, but when we were on the train in England, they came over the intercom to tell us there is only one other train that is from this line, and it is in Essex, Connecticut.
And did you cheer?
I did. I told my wife, who was on the train with me in England, I said, this looks like a train in Essex, Connecticut that I've been on. And then they were like, there's only one other train like this, and it is in Essex, Connecticut. And I was like, oh, see, now I've been on both of the Thomases that exist in the entire world.
Nice. For context listeners, Seth and I grew up with Seth was primarily very into Thomas, and I got into Thomas because Seth had a lot of leftover toys.
Yeah.
And episodes of Thomas on tape that he recorded off of the TV.
Yes.
Shining Time
Billy
Station.
Two-Feather.
Yeah. With Billy Two Feather and Dee Dee Khan and
Do you know that Billy Two-Feather, whenever I have to go to sleep, there's an episode of Thomas the Tank Engine that is a core memory of mine where they are sleeping over at the station and one of the children goes to Billy Two-Feather and says, I can't sleep. And he says, shut your eyes and pretend to sleep. And whenever I go to sleep and I have trouble sleeping, I just see Billy Toothfeather in my mind telling me to just shut my eyes and pretend to sleep.
Anyway, the game itself was very nostalgic for me because it features a lot of music from the Thomas show, just like digitized into Sega Genesis, which growing up with a Sega Genesis and listening to Thomas music through it is like, I wish I owned this game as a child. I would have loved this game. I would have played this game all the time. Your job is to primarily do assorted tasks, such as getting things that Sir Topham Hatt tells you to collect. This can be a cart that has a blue triangle on it, or a cart that has a yellow circle on it. I played in easy mode, even though it was a children's game, and I was like, I don't even know what I'm doing, so I'll play in easy mode. And he's not even very clear with his instructions. He's like, hey, get one cart with something blue on it. So you don't even have to find like a specific type of cart. I assume on the harder difficulties, he's like, get the cart that has the blue triangle, but don't get the cart that has the blue square. In any case, you find these and you bring them to the nearest train station, and it's deposited and you get points. And then Sir Topham Hatt tells you did a very good job and you are very fast if you do it quickly. I don't know what he tells you if you're very slow. Maybe he's like, gotta speed up next time, buddy. The game is actually, interestingly enough, entirely voice acted, which surprised me for a Sega Genesis game. And by entirely voice acted, I mean there is one voice the entire time that reads all of the words. That is the voice of apparently Craig Irwart, who was the programmer, and he reads the words out, and they're kind of like just cobbled together. So sometimes the inflection's wrong. So it'll be like,
Hi, I am James. Congratulations. You did a wonderful job. You worked fast today.
Anyway, the game is actually kind of fun. I had a good time. It's a pretty simple puzzle game, but the music and the kind of actual gameplay is relatively enjoyable. Overall, kind of holds up. Would I play it again? I might, actually. I might try the harder settings to see if they are as hard as I imagine they'd be, instead of being like, get object to station. Hopefully it's like, get this specific object to this specific station, because all the stations are labeled. So...
Do you know what's not labeled in the game? The trains. James, Percy, Toby, and Duck's in-game sprites are missing their numbers. I also read that on some menu screens, as well as the in-game sprites, all the engines share the same face.
Yeah, it's kind of scary. What is also kind of scary is when you do certain things, sometimes the face of your train will just appear in this huge square in the corner of the game and just smile at you for a second. Then disappear, and it is haunting. Anyway, does the game hold up? Sure. Will I play it again? Probably. Should you play it? Definitely. Seth, next week, you're not going to play Thomas game. You're going to play Wario Land for the Game Boy.
Thank you. Zach had me playing Rock and Roll Racing for the Sega Genesis, which was released in North America in 1993, developed by Silicon and Synapse, who we've mentioned before because they become Blizzard. And it was published by Interplay Productions. This game is great. It is like RC Pro-Am, but instead you could damage other cars to the point where they can't drive anymore. And that makes any game better, because RC Pro-Am is great. RC Pro-Am with destructible cars is even better. And that's what Rock and Roll Racing is. But wait, there's more. It also has some great heavy metal and rock songs that play while you're racing. So it's like RC Pro-Am, but better in all ways. It's a great game for the SNES, and if I had it when I was a kid, it would have hit the same way that RC Pro-Am did, which is just an amazing game that I would have played. In fact, I probably would have liked it even better because they had some interesting characters. They all come from different planets. It's kind of like F-Zero, except instead of driving futuristic cars, you're driving Jeeps that explode. It's like if there was like a poor man's F-Zero, like, you know, like F-Zero's happening at the top of the city and the floating like top over the city, rock and roll racing is like happening like in the gutter. So that's kind of like what rock and roll racing is. But in rock and roll racing, there is a guy called Cyberhawk who looks like Groundhog from The Boys. And if you don't know what Groundhog from The Boys is, think about Hawkman from DC and then cross him with Wolverine, make his costume blue, and instead of having hands, he has hammers. And that's Groundhog. And if you do a side profile of his face, that's Cyberhawk from rock and roll racing. So I played as Cyberhawk. I kept playing. Like, I would beat a match and I would continue to play. So it was kind of fun. There, you can actually get thrown like off the map too, because there's like bumps and jumps and all that sorts of stuff. I played on easy, so like I won regularly, which was great. Anyway, rock and roll racing's great. Holds up. It's a fine game. Zach, next week you could play a game that's like rock and roll racing, except it has mice. It's Biker Mice from Mars for the SNES.
Ooh. Okay, I'll do that.
And with that, that's going to be our episode. If you want to contact us and send us an email, you can send us an email to classicgamingbrothers@gmail.com. You can always follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitch, all at Classic Gaming Brothers. And we are on Twitter at CG Brothers Pod. You can also listen to us or follow us on any podcast app that you have. There we go. That's where we are. Zach.
Yes, Seth.
Is there anything that I'm missing?
Don't play games like my brother.
And don't play games like my brother.
I've been Zach.
I've been Seth.
We've been the Classic Gaming Brothers. That's
right.